This incredible sound trick allowed virtually blind Allied spotters to find and destroy U-boats in conditions of absolute zero visibility, the vast, freezing North Atlantic. In the dark winter of 1942, a bone-chilling mist rolls across the black waves like a thick, silent blanket, cutting visual range to only a few meters. Deep beneath the surface, a German U-boat captain carefully observes the vague passing forms of Allied merchant vessels through his periscope. For him, the dense fog is a gift from the war deities, a powerful shield of invisibility that makes him essentially untouchable. For the long Allied convoy proceeding above, this weather represents an inevitable death sentence that is just waiting to be delivered. This stark scenario defined the Battle of the Atlantic, the longest continuous military struggle of the Second World War. From 1939 all the way through 1945, German submarines stalked these waters like hungry wolves, ultimately sinking over 3,000 Allied ships and extinguishing the lives of more than 72,000 sailors and merchant marines. The stark mathematical truth was chilling. If the Allied forces were incapable of seeing the underwater predators hunting them, they had no chance of fighting back. And most of the time, sighting them was impossible. The early version of radar technology, still experimental, fought a losing battle against the atmospheric chaos of the open Atlantic. Dense banks of fog, sudden rain squalls, and the constant spray from rough waves made most early radar systems practically useless. Even when the conditions were ideal, radar could only locate submarines that were currently operating on the surface. As soon as a U-boat descended beneath the waves, it completely vanished from the electronic detection of Allied gear. The difficult challenge confronting Allied Naval Command seemed utterly insurmountable. How does one locate an opponent that cannot be seen, something specifically designed to be undetectable? Something that operates within a complex three-dimensional environment where all conventional naval tactics simply failed to apply. The crucial answer would arrive not from the blinking radar screens or from visual observers, but from an unexpected sensory source that long predated modern warfare: the fundamental human ability to hear. The ultimate solution to the pressing U-boat threat was concealed within the ocean itself, traveling through the water as unseen waves of pressure or sound. While this may feel self-evident with historical perspective, the systematic deployment of acoustic detection to track down submarines represented an enormous, revolutionary step in naval conflict. The British had been actively developing their ASDIC system, an acronym for the Anti-Submarine Detection Investigation Committee, since the final stages of the First World War. However, it was only under the dire pressure of World War II that acoustic submarine hunting truly came into its own. Enter the forgotten heroes of this story, the acoustic operators, sometimes officially called submarine detectors, or more vividly known as ping merchants. These were not the typical men of the sea. They were highly specialized technicians trained to handle complex hydrophone equipment that could pick up the faintest sound vibrations traveling through the great Atlantic depths. Imagine a young sailor fresh out of training, hunched over his intricate equipment in a small, cramped area aboard a destroyer being tossed by the waves. He wears thick headphones clamped tight over his ears, his eyes tightly shut in intense concentration as he listens for noises that the average person would never even know existed. The science underlying their work was both straightforward and utterly profound. Sound propagates through water approximately 4 times faster than it does through air, roughly 1,500 meters per second compared to 340 in the atmosphere. This specific physical property meant that a well-trained operator could identify a submarine at ranges that would be utterly impossible through direct visual sighting. The ASDIC equipment functioned by transmitting a focused burst of sound, usually around 20 kilohertz, right at the upper boundary of human hearing, into the water. This sound pulse would travel outward, and when it impacted a dense object like a submarine's hull, it would return as an audible echo. But here is the truly compelling part. The advanced technology was only half of the required equation. Early acoustic devices were primitive, unstable, and frequently provided false readings. Under perfect conditions, an ASDIC set might successfully detect a submerged submarine at distances up to 2,000 yards, but ideal conditions were extremely rare in the hostile North Atlantic. The true innovation was not in the detection machinery itself, it was in the exceptional human beings rigorously trained to interpret the raw acoustic sounds they encountered. These operators became the vital human connection between raw acoustic information and immediately executable military intelligence. They were in essence translating the fundamental language of the ocean into the precise coordinates of life and death. The initial doubt from Naval Command was completely understandable. How could some sailors wearing only headphones possibly locate submarines more effectively than highly touted radar or visual spotters? The entire concept seemed almost mystical, like asking a clairvoyant to predict the next enemy strike. But desperate situations demanded radically innovative solutions. And as the intense U-boat campaign rapidly escalated through 1941 and 1942, the Royal Navy and the Royal Canadian Navy began to heavily fund acoustic detection training programs. What they successfully created was something truly extraordinary. The process of transforming a normal sailor into an elite acoustic operator was an intense, physically demanding ordeal that bordered on the incredible. Veterans of the ASDIC training described the program as one of the most psychologically grueling experiences of their entire military service. The training commenced with classroom instruction on the propagation of sound, the construction of submarines, and the technical specifications of the detection hardware. But this was merely the beginning. The real focus was on cultivating what can only be accurately described as superhuman auditory perception. Commander Welland, the Royal Canadian Navy's top expert in anti-submarine warfare, managed his training facility with brutal authority and a zero tolerance for errors. His core philosophy was starkly simple. If you cracked under the training pressure, you would certainly fail under combat fire when the lives of hundreds of men depended on your pinpoint accuracy. Trainees spent countless weeks at the attack table, a complex mock-up that simulated convoy operations with multiple escort vessels, lines of merchant ships, and attacking U-boats under various challenging water and weather conditions. Welland and his experienced instructors would deliberately generate impossible scenarios: submarines attacking from several different directions, equipment suddenly malfunctioning, overlapping or confusing acoustic signatures, all while yelling at the operators as they frantically tried to maintain crucial contact and coordinate attacks. The psychological toll was severe. Many trainees were emotionally broken by the relentless pressure. Some failed completely, unable to meet the crushing demands of the difficult training regime. But those few who survived the process emerged as something akin to acoustic savants. They rapidly learned to filter out the deafening environmental noise, the turbulent thrashing of their own ship's spinning propellers, the heavy grinding of the merchant vessel's engines in the convoy, the crashing impact of waves against the hull, and even the natural biological sounds of large whales and dolphins. From this utterly chaotic soundscape, they had to precisely isolate the distinctive acoustic signatures of enemy submarines. What made this skill even more amazing was the level of detail they could achieve. Different classes of U-boat produced distinctly separate sound profiles based on their specific engine types, the configurations of their propellers, and the unique shapes of their hulls. A Type 7 U-boat, the reliable workhorse of the German fleet, generated a noticeably different acoustic fingerprint than a larger, long-range Type 9 boat. Experienced operators claimed they could correctly identify not just the submarine's class, but sometimes even precisely estimate its operational depth and speed, purely based on the specific qualities of the sound they picked up. When a U-boat shut down his loud diesel engines and silently switched to electric motors for quiet running, the acoustic operators could detect the subtle but critical change in frequency and rhythm. They transformed the language of the ocean into coordinates of life and death. The training process climaxed with real-world exercises at sea in St. Margaret's Bay off Halifax, where trainees worked against actual Dutch submarines, simulating realistic U-boat maneuvers. For 10 consecutive days and nights, operators would patiently track submarines as they dove deep, maneuvered sharply, and sat silently on the seabed, attempting to escape detection. Every single mistake resulted in biting, scathing criticism. Each successful contact brought only grudging, brief acknowledgement. By the completion of this intense crucible, the surviving operators had developed an almost supernatural ability to clearly hear submarines. Some of the men even reported that while they were sleeping, they could still clearly hear the phantom, familiar pinging sound of their ASDIC transmissions. The unique sound had become so deeply embedded in their consciousness that it completely invaded their dreams. Understanding how these skilled acoustic operators actually executed attacks against U-boats reveals the deadly accuracy of their refined craft. When an ASDIC operator successfully detected a submarine, he wasn't merely hearing a vague noise in the distance. Through careful, deliberate manipulation of his specialized equipment, he could determine the enemy's precise bearing, range, and, with sufficient experience, even the depth and movement characteristics of the target. The operator controlled a transducer housed in a protective, retractable dome underneath the ship's hull, usually located right beneath the bridge. This transmitter could be swung in a wide arc, emitting pulses every few seconds as the operator listened closely for any return echoes. Once solid contact was established, the operator would instantly report to the bridge. The critical information flowed rapidly: target bearing, estimated range, and movement characteristics. During coordinated convoy operations, multiple escort vessels equipped with ASDIC could pinpoint a U-boat's location with truly remarkable accuracy through triangulation. If one destroyer detected a submarine at a bearing of 035 degrees at 1,500 yards, and a corvette on the convoy's flank simultaneously picked up the same target at a different angle, simple geometry could locate the U-boat's precise position with fatal precision. This crucial coordination transformed acoustic detection from a merely defensive tool into an extremely effective offensive weapon. The specific attack procedures that followed were carefully organized, deadly ballets of destruction. In the initial years of the conflict, depth charges represented the main anti-submarine weapon. These were essentially large explosive barrels filled with high explosives that were set to detonate at specific calibrated depths. A destroyer would steer directly over the estimated position of a U-boat, rolling depth charges off stern racks, while side throwers launched additional charges to create a pattern designed to bracket the elusive target. The central challenge was successfully maintaining acoustic contact while simultaneously approaching attack range. A destroyer's own loud propeller noise would often totally overwhelm the subtle submarine signature as the escort accelerated for the final attack run. This is exactly where the human element became supremely important. A truly skilled ASDIC operator had to maintain clear contact for as long as humanly possible, feeding continuous real-time updates to the bridge about any changes in the submarine's depth or position. The operator's last reported bearing before losing contact would precisely guide the ultimate depth charge pattern. Official combat records from early 1942 showed that the lethal probability of a single depth charge pattern was only about 3%. To successfully destroy a U-boat often required numerous attacks over several grueling hours, with the acoustic operator having to re-establish contact after each run and painstakingly guiding the escort vessel back to the elusive target. The revolutionary introduction of the Hedgehog weapon in 1943 dramatically increased the acoustic operator's effectiveness. Unlike traditional depth chargers dropped from the stern, the Hedgehog was a forward-throwing spigot mortar that rapidly fired 24 contact-fused projectiles ahead of the attacking ship. This meant the escort did not have to pass directly over the submarine to launch the attack, allowing the ASDIC operator to successfully maintain contact throughout the entire engagement.
The subsequent results were profound. Out of 5,174 British depth charge attacks, there were roughly 85 confirmed kills, a ratio of about 60 attacks for single kill. The Hedgehog, in stark contrast, achieved 268 attacks with 47 confirmed kills, nearly tripling the effectiveness ratio. Historical documentation records numerous examples where acoustic operators directly facilitated U-boat kills in blinding fog conditions where visual sighting was utterly impossible. Aztec operators would detect submarines attempting to stealthily infiltrate convoys, guiding escort ships to the exact threat before any torpedoes could be launched. During night actions, when U-boats preferred to attack on the surface, utilizing their superior speed, acoustic operators employing passive hydrophone listening could detect the telltale cavitation noise of the submarine propellers and accurately vector destroyers onto targets that were otherwise completely invisible in the inky darkness. The powerful synergy between highly trained human perception and early technology created a hunting capability that gradually but surely reversed the tide in the Battle of the Atlantic. As the war progressed and technical capabilities advanced, the crucial role of the acoustic operator changed, but it never became redundant. Even as more complex sonar systems entered active service, the human element remained critically important. The core principles that these wartime operators established, differentiating a specific signal from overwhelming background noise, recognizing unique acoustic signatures, triangulating a position using multiple bearings, became fundamental to modern anti-submarine warfare. Today's highly skilled sonar operators on modern nuclear submarines and surface warships are the direct professional descendants of those World War II-era ping merchants, using vastly more advanced equipment but applying fundamentally identical analytical skills. The enduring legacy of these acoustic operators stretches far beyond pure military applications. Their crucial work contributed directly to the broader scientific understanding of underwater acoustics, the physics of sound propagation in the ocean environment, and the characteristics of human-generated noise in marine settings. Post-war scientific developments in oceanography, marine biology, and underwater communications all built upon the critical knowledge acquired during the desperate struggle against the U-boat fleet. The SOUS system, the sound surveillance system deployed extensively during the Cold War to track Soviet submarines, represented a direct, massive-scale evolution of wartime acoustic detection principles scaled up to continental proportions. But perhaps the most enduring legacy is what these operators conclusively proved about the limits of human potential. They demonstrated that through focused, intense training and absolute dedication, human sensory perception could be refined to extraordinary levels. They proved that even in an age of growing mechanization and automatic systems, the crucial human element remained utterly indispensable. The complex technology provided the essential tools, but it was human intelligence, human adaptability, and human perseverance that successfully transformed those tools into effective weaponry. In an age where powerful artificial intelligence and autonomous systems now dominate the discourse on modern warfare, there is something deeply meaningful to remember that some of the most lethally effective submarine hunters in history were young sailors armed with nothing more than their specialized headphones and the almost impossible ability to truly listen. The ultimate victory in the Battle of the Atlantic was secured through numerous intersecting factors: better convoy tactics, extended long-range air coverage, critical intelligence from Enigma decryption, and improved weaponry. But woven throughout all of these essential elements were the acoustic operators, the dedicated men who could successfully locate submarines in conditions where finding them should have been scientifically impossible. They effectively turned blinding fog into a simple irrelevance. They made darkness transparent. Sometimes the strongest weapon is the one that enables you to hear. They proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon is not the one that generates the loudest noise, but the one that allows you to clearly hear the whispers of your enemy. Please like and subscribe to WW2 Deep Insights to keep exploring the incredible untold stories of World War II. In the most intense fog of war, when visual contact disappeared and conventional tactics failed, these dedicated operators provided the eyes, or rather the precise ears, that kept Allied convoys safe and successfully sent U-boats to the bottom. Their inspiring story deserves to be fully remembered, not merely as a small footnote in naval history, but as a profound testament to raw human ingenuity successfully triumphing over what seemed like impossible odds.